Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar series, Life After the Pandemic, Facing the New Normal. This is the 7th session of our webinar sponsored by the Active Citizenship Foundation. My name is Alvin Dizon, your moderator for today's session. The role of local governments in responding to a crisis cannot be underemphasized. And during this we are joined today by our two local governance champions who will share their insights on how our local leaders and policymakers respond to this crisis and work effectively under the new normal. Now, I would like to welcome our two speakers in the platform. First, we have Mayor Trina Firmalo-Fabic from the municipality of Odiongan in the province of Romblon. Welcome, Mayor Fabic.
Hello, magandang hapon po sa lahat.
Also joining us is Joel Rocamora, the Executive Director of the Institute for Popular Democracy and former Secretary of the National Anti-Poverty Commission. Thank you, Mayor Fabic and Secretary Rocamora, for joining us today. We appreciate both your time. I would also like to thank all our webinar participants for being here today. So far, we have a total of 75 registered participants for today's session. And special mention to all our local government officials and NGO advocates from different parts of the country who are joining us today. Before we get started, let me inform everyone that there will be a Q&A at the end of the presentations of Mayor Fabic and Secretary Rocamora. Each speaker is given a maximum of 20 minutes to deliver their presentation. So please enter your questions and comments in the chat box in your Zoom control panel. Our ACF staff are in the platform to take your questions, and I'll bring them up during the Q&A portion. Let us begin our webinar with the formal introduction of our first speaker. Our speaker is the Mayor of Odiongan, which is the largest and fastest growing municipality in the province of Romblon. She was first elected in 2016 and was re-elected in 2019. Among her notable achievements as a local chief executive are as follows. Mayor Fabic initiated the Barangay Caravan, which brings the municipal government services to the people on a rotating schedule around the different communities of the municipality to improve clients' access. She led the municipality to obtain the 2017 Seal of Good Local Governance and to be ranked #1 most competitive municipality in the entire Mimaropa region and #9 in government efficiency nationwide. Our speaker,
Everybody doesn't mind. I will just get to my presentation. I think that he has introduced me quite sufficiently. So good afternoon to everyone. My name is Mayor Trina, and as Councilor Alvin mentioned, I am from the municipality of Odiongan, Romblon. Sa mga hindi po nakakaalam kung saan ang Romblon, ito po ay nasa ibabaw ng Boracay, nasa kanan ng Mindoro, nasa ilalim ng Batangas. Yan. So we are actually at the heart of country. So I want to share with you my presentation. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to start my talk about crisis management and transitioning to the new normal, especially for local government. So as I was saying, ito po kami po ay nasa kapusuan o nasa gitna ng ating bansa. Kami po ay grupo ng mga isla. So we have around 230 islands and islets in the province of Romblon. So my town of Odiongan is located on the main island of Tablas. So as Councilor Alvin mentioned earlier, we are the largest and fastest growing municipality in the province. Mamaya, makikita natin how significant that is kasi when it comes to COVID, the community quarantine, where we know that there are movement restrictions, kami po ang pinupuntahan ng halos lahat ng iba't ibang bayan sa probinsya, lalo na sa aming isla. So there are 8 other towns on our island. So on a daily basis, most of them go to the market, conduct business transactions, go to school, do everything in our town. No? So that's something that has ramifications in terms of movement. So I'll explain that later on. Okay, so there we are. So we're a second-class municipality. We have 25 barangays. Our land area is 15,093 hectares. Our population is about 52,000. But as I mentioned earlier, because of the number of people who are coming in from the different towns, dumadagdag yan ng around 5,000 day population. Our main industries are commerce, agriculture, and fishing. We are the center of education, trade, governance, and commerce. So we're accessible by boat. We're 8 hours away from Batangas. We also have a plane, but right now flights are canceled. It's 2 towns away, 1 hour away. Because of this pandemic, local government units have been forced or prompted to really respond in different ways. No? Unlike sa mga bagyo or earthquakes or other calamities where we already have calibrated responses, we've already had numerous trainings prepared for those kinds of events. A pandemic is relatively new for us local government units. What was the initial response of our local government unit when the pandemic first started in February and March? Of course, on our part, we issued executive orders. We created the Municipal Task Force on Emerging Infectious Diseases. So this task force, primarily the consultative body. So sila ang gumagawa ng policies, po ang nagiging pinaka-mover, no? Yung ating task force. We also issued executive orders and creating guidelines how to handle the NCOV threats in the municipality. So we activated checkpoints at all entry and exit points and at the port as well, because the port coming into the island is located in our municipality. Preparation of quarantine areas, disinfection of public areas, public monitoring of price of medicines and preventive gadgets. So if you remember, when the pandemic first broke out here in our country, nagtaasan ng presyo yung mga face masks, yung mga alcohol, nagkaubusan. So we had to institute policies to regulate that. Coordination with all tourism establishments and public utility vehicles, creation of barangay health emergency response teams, implementation of other precautionary measures. So there were no responses that we could copy. No, we really had to come up with our own. So parang ano siya talaga, pakapa-kapa, no? We really had to figure things out for ourselves. We issued public advisories, canceled public gatherings. We made sure that everyone entering into our municipality submitted health declaration cards. We met the barangay officials. So yung sabi ko kanina, we activated the emergency response teams and we really had to orient them kasi nga nobody knew what this was all about. So we had to ensure that everybody understood and was on the same page what was happening. And then before the community quarantine was implemented, we urged residents that were outside the province to return home immediately if they could. So they were given 48 hours to return home and were placed under home quarantine before being allowed to go in public. So we had 1,380 persons who came home in just a few days. So you can imagine the weight of such a problem. So we really had to activate our barangay officials and give them support so that they could manage that 1,380 persons. So another question that is being asked is how ready were the LGUs and how ready are we at this point in time? So we have to look at the COVID-19 pandemic not just as a health issue, but also as an economic problem. So it's a two-pronged issue because of the restrictions on movement and closure of businesses. So in terms of health, it's not just a drain on health and hospital resources. We see that most local government units were really not prepared for this problem. So in terms of yung health workers, frontliners, yung mga kailangan bilhin na mga kagamitan, no, all of these are not planned and not programmed. So we had to make measures to adjust to that. And then when we talk about this being a health problem, it's not just about the physical well-being. Yes, physical for the COVID patients, but for people affected by the community quarantine and the movement restrictions, we also have to look at their mental well-being. So we know that during this time, there were a lot of mental health problems, people, no? So that's also things that we have to consider. In terms of economics, people were not allowed to move around and to work for a prolonged period. So this led to severe economic repercussions. So alam natin na syempre nagsara ang ibang mga negosyo, hindi inallow na mag-open. So these were things that all local governments had to grapple with. There was also a drain on the resources of the LGUs. So of course we had to provide relief and food for constituents who were affected by community quarantine. And then we also had to take into account yung mga hazard pay, mga overtime ng mga frontliners, government workers, health workers, the need for additional manpower. Kasi for example, yung pagbabantay sa mga quarantine areas is a 24-hour job. So hindi pwedeng yung mga regular employees lang. You have to employ more people to complement and supplement the manpower. And then, as I said, unplanned and unexpected costs. So for example, we had to provide shuttles for people who were affected by community quarantine, di ba? Yung wala pang mga mass transportation. So all those things are unplanned costs. So lahat yan ay kailangan i-take into consideration. So of course, we activated the joint uniform personnel checkpoints. We set the BHERTs. We had mobile testing centers for the new arrivals. We had a partnership with the Department of Education to allow us to use the schools as quarantine facilities. We had a dedicated isolation facility for probable and confirmed COVID patients. Again, the task force to identify the protocols, approval of returning residents. We realigned budgets to support COVID-19 response programs. So it was very tricky. We had to reassess and re-examine priority. And yung mga hindi masyadong priority, yung mga travel budgets, yung mga seminar budgets. So lahat po yan ay ni-reappropriate for COVID-19 response programs. So I want to share with you some of the best practices that we had. We conducted daily disinfection to all public places and arriving vehicles para talagang medyo maganda yung ating hygiene. We had food pack relief assistance to all residents. So ang thinking namin, lahat ng households affected ng situation, no? So kahit wala man sila mga COVID patients, they're affected economically by the community quarantine. So we tried as much as possible to provide relief for all households. And then we also targeted sectors. So we had yung mga senior citizens namin, yung mga persons with disabilities, all those different groups. We gave them their special food pack relief assistances, yung mga porters, vendors, tri-bike drivers, single drivers, so mga customized assistance packs for them. We offer daily free shuttle services to frontliners and government workers. We conducted daily Facebook Live updates on COVID-19 related initiatives, which was simulcasted on local TV and radio. So of course, we want to reach all the people, no, all the constituents. So hindi naman lahat may social media. So you really have to reach out on various platforms. So para naman sa mga walang TV, walang radio, meron din po kami posters and tarpaulins which we put up in all visible areas in the municipality. We started a laboratory on wheels to provide assistance to residents, especially senior citizens, in accessing the regular laboratory examination. So umiikot yung mobile lab para mabigay yung mga services sa ating mga constituents. We also had e-reseta by the Rural Health Unit. So pwede ka magpa-e-reseta. You don't have to go to the doctor face-to-face. And we also had free delivery of medicines. So you could call our hotline. Pupunta kami sa inyo, kunin yung reseta at yung pera, and then we will go to the botica or the drugstore or the grocery to buy what you need and then deliver it back to you. Syempre, that's a free service. Also, what we wanted to do was to provide nutritious leaf packs, at the same time help our farmers and fisher folks who were deeply affected by community quarantine. Kasi yung mga backyard producers, yung mga farmers po namin, hindi basta-basta makapunta sa bayan para ibenta yung produkto nila sa palengke. So, nabubulok lang yung mga gulay at prutas. So, what we did was that the municipality was the one who purchased all the vegetables and fruits of our farmers. We set up buying stations in the barangays, we purchased the vegetables and fruits, and we provided them doon sa aming mga packs. No? So, our relief packs, instead of just delata, also provided nutritious food packs that would help them boost their immune system and improve their health. So it was a dual purpose. We were able to help our farmers and fisher folks economically kasi hindi lang po mga gulay at prutas, bumili din po kami ng mga manok, mga isda, other fresh products, no? And provided this sa aming mga families. We also initiated the Mercado on the Go, which is the mobile market where fresh vegetables and meats from local producers were sold directly to the community. So may umiikot po na palengke para po sa lahat. We also provided support to mothers with infant children by providing diapers, milk, and vitamins. And then we initiated a local social amelioration program called Odiongan Tulong and Agapay Program, or OTAP. So as we know, we have social amelioration program from the national government, but this was not for all the constituents. So they were only able to cover a certain percentage of families. So yung hindi po na-cover ng SAP ay kinover po namin sa OTAP. And this was also the Bayanihan grant as well as local funds. So in short, all 15,400 households of our town were provided assistance. Our municipal tourism office provided assistance to all stranded tourists so that they could return to their home countries. And then we also had an oversupply of chicken kasi hindi namin mailabas yung aming mga produkto sa Batangas or sa Boracay. And also we had a cancellation of our fiesta celebration. So we initiated an online lechon selling for a cause. And all the proceeds, we raised almost 50,000 pesos, went to further relief goods for families. And then we were able to also address the oversupply of chickens. The Sangguniang Kabataan initiated a mobile library called Libro on the Go. So para po hindi masyadong mabore yung mga bata sa bahay, so we were able to have a Libro on the Go. So mobile library went around the different barangays. Children were able to borrow books. So at least hindi naman puro Mobile Legends lang. They were able, read some books. Meron din naman kaming mga TikTok challenge and other contests. Best corner of the house, best video vlog of your house, no? Yung mga ganon parang so that we could also cater to our youth. We also produced face masks for the public and local PPEs for the use of our COVID-19 response task force. So this was also an economic project where we tapped our local seamstresses. So yung mga mananahi po namin, sila ang gumawa ng mga face masks and these. So hindi na po kami masyado nag-purchase from outside. We were able to make our own. This was also part of our information dissemination. We wanted to be transparent to our public. So aside from our daily updates, we provided them a report of what we did during this COVID-19 time, no? During the pandemic and during the community quarantine. So we have the figures just so that people can really understand. So you can see the pictures po, yung nag-prepare kami ng aming mga Nutri-Pack, yung sa ito mga agricultural products namin. Then for our senior citizens, for our parents, lactating mothers, malnourished children. So the different sectors were given attention and assistance. So yung sa ating SAP beneficiaries, we were able to really go around the barangays and provide that assistance. We dispensed it as soon as we could, as quickly as we could. And we also provided our own social amelioration program for households who were not beneficiaries po. So our rural health unit, so may mga i-reseta po kami, yung aming mga deliveries, and then manning the ports every day. Our laboratory on wheels. We were able to help the senior citizens get free lab care. We had a free shuttle service. So in a span of a month and a half, we had more than 5,000 passengers. So this was a free shuttle. And then we also had disinfection operation. So yun na nga po. So we started a daily update. Kasi what's very vital in any pandemic or any crisis situation is that constituents are informed. You must have adequate, sufficient, and accurate information so that there's a balance of not panicking, but at the same time, they remain vigilant and compliant with our protocols. Handouts, flyers, tarpaulins, aside from our tri-media, social media, TV, and radio. Our lesson selling for a cause, and then our Libro on the go. So yan po yung mga pictures. And then our Mercado on the go. So we went around all the barangays and even to adjacent municipalities. Our Mercado on the go reached other towns as well. Our tourism office was able to help other foreigners and OFWs to go back to their home countries. And then, of course, our checkpoints in and out of. Okay, so going forward, what are our recommendations? Because as we know, we're transitioning to the new normal, as they say. So some of our recommendations are these. I truly believe that LGUs should be involved in policy making of the IATF and the national government to reflect the realities on the ground. Because as we know, marami pong polisiya ang IATF na minsan nahihirapan po kami sa baba na ma-implement. So for example, yung sa backriding sa motorcycles, so that's something that's very difficult for us to implement na magkaroon pa ng barriers and other things. And for islands such as us, where motorcycle is the main form of transportation, napakahirap po na walang back rides. Pwede sana is within the household, immediate household, sana ay pwede. So those kinds of things, which I think would be possible if we had LGUs who were represented sa policy making po ng ating national government. I would also like to push for mass testing. Alam natin na this is vital for any calibrated response to COVID-19 or any pandemic. So there has to be support to build up laboratory capabilities in each province. So katulad po kami, kung meron po kaming pinapaswab, dinadala pa po yan sa RITM sa Manila. Minsan iniipon pa ang samples bago ipadala. So it really takes some time before we can get the results. So for us to have more responsive program, we need to be able to get the results as quickly as possible. So there has to be mass testing and support to have these testing capabilities in each province. I think moving forward, we also have to invest further in comprehensive healthcare and strengthen our PhilHealth insurance so that we can be more responsive to COVID-19 and other medical conditions. We should also establish and strengthen mental health programs. So kami po, on our part, we've had debriefing sessions for our frontliners kasi sila po yung talagang affected nitong mga panahon nito. Also, we're starting a psychiatric program with UPPGH. So kailangan din nating mabuti yung ating mental health care programs, especially in a situation where movement is restricted and there isn't as much social support for people. We have to put premium on e-services. So yung ating websites, social media, hotlines, being able to apply for permits and licenses online or through barangay stations. So pwede po tayo mag-set up, kung hindi connected masyado, like kami sa probinsya, hindi ganun kagandang internet connection. So, and not everybody has smartphones. So possible to have barangay stations where people can go and carry out their transactions sa munisipyo. Should also work on online meetings and maybe have, e-weddings and other things. So we have to think outside of the box. Hindi na pwede yung katulad ng dati. So we have to think of what's possible and how to make life easier for everyone, considering the movement restrictions. Support for e-palengke or community mart models. So dito po sa amin, 3 weeks ago, we've already launched our e-Palengke. So people can use a mini app on Facebook. So it doesn't require a different app. So just on Facebook Messenger, you can log into e-Palengke and you can already purchase products from the market. And this will be delivered to you for a very minimal fee. So because of that, we don't have to move around so much. We can work within the movement restrictions. At the same time, nakakasuporta pa rin tayo sa ating mga vendors. We also should have more programs geared towards food production. If community quarantine has taught us anything, it's the importance of producing our own food. So really, we're trying to do seeds distribution. We're encouraging everybody to plant in their backyards. So we're doing community gardens and school gardens, vegetable gardens. So ito po yung aming programa ngayon. Modifying programs for smaller collectives. So kung dati-dati ang mga programa natin by barangay, so dapat ngayon siguro by sitios na so that we can still conform to social distancing measures. Modifying parameters, restrictions for establishments and businesses and offices as well. So yung space management, ventilation, etc. So we have to have clear policies on this and cascade this down to the ground. Kailangan maging malinaw sa mga tao kung ano mga kailangan gawin dito sa new normal. Innovate new forms of transportation. So yun na nga po, kailangan na natin ng mga siguro bagong modes, bagong forms. Be more creative in coming up with these new kinds of tri-bikes or new kinds of jeepneys, etc. That could adapt to the new normal. Implementation of fintech for business transactions. So kailangan na po natin talaga yung financial technology. So kung yung mga GCash or yung mga online payments, all those things, we have to siguro mainstream that so that more people can use these so we don't have to transact so much personally, face-to-face, or physically with money. Sinusulong din po natin yung ID system. So this pandemic has also taught us the importance of data, knowing who our households are, knowing who our constituents are, what their needs are. So an ID system would facilitate that. It would facilitate documentation, contact tracing, relief assistance distribution. So I think an ID system is something that we're really looking at the moment. But of course, the system should be secure and safe so that information is safeguarded. We also need programs to support MSMEs, workers, people who lost their jobs. So as we said, this pandemic is not only a health problem, but an economic conundrum as well. So how do we support our people economically? So we have to be able to provide assistance to them. What we did po was, for the past few months, yung mga nagpwesto po sa aming palengke and other municipal establishments, we gave them free rent. So wala po silang binayaran for March, April, May. And then we gave them discounts for the other months. But again, that's something that is not sustainable in the long term. So we should have programs to support our small businesses in some other ways. We should modify our CLUPs and land use policies to reflect a mixed-use kind of development strategy that will lessen the need to travel across long distances. So if you look at it from an environmental planning point of view, mas mas adaptable siguro or mas needed sa situation natin yung mixed use. So hindi lang yung puro commercial, puro residential, puro industrial. Hindi na po siguro uso yung mga zoning na ganon. Kundi mas mahalaga sa atin ngayon at mas angkop ang mixed use. So for example, you have commercial on the first floor, you have residential on the second and third floor. So that creates little hubs and communities where people don't have to travel so much to other places or to other. I think we also have to recalibrate our comprehensive land use plans. National government should invest more in science and technology as well as research and development. So isa sa na-highlight ng new normal ay yung pangailangan natin for more science-based and technological solutions. So sana magkaroon tayo ng strengthening ng ating R&D and science and technology. And then harnessing the power of private philanthropy and social capital and cultivating a culture of volunteerism. Kung mapapansin niyo sa mga panahon ngayon, napakarami pong mga tao na tumutulong sa iba. So we didn't have just funds from the government, but we had the private sector really actively playing their part and stepping up. So I think there should be a way to harness that para talagang ma-complement nila ang efforts ng government para mas maging maganda ang ating patutunguhan sa new normal. In terms of legislation, support in terms of the law for these aforementioned policies, yung mga nabanggit ko kanina. Also legislation to regulate and support, no? But more support, I think, online businesses and online platforms. And an economic stimulus package to help businesses, especially small-scale businesses and those who are unemployed, no? Because of the pandemic. So all these go together. Underlying all of these policies and recommendations, I think they're indispensable principles, no? I think not just leaders, but all of us, we must adapt to the new normal by becoming consultative, no? We have to really try to get input from all stakeholders before we carry out or formulate any policies. We have to be creative and innovative. Hindi na pwede yung mga katulad ng dati. We have to think out of the box. What are new ways that we can do things? And we can always look to each other. No? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. So we can look at what other places are doing. These are worthwhile to replicate, and we should replicate them and adapt them to our situation. We have to become tech savvy. So really harness technology to come up with good programs and policies for our constituents. We have to be informative. So we have to, well, first we have to be well informed, and then we have to be informative. So really, I have to stress that one of the key things about all of this is the need to provide sufficient, adequate, and accurate information to your constituents. And then let's be supportive of the players, of all the stakeholders and the frontliners. And we have to be resilient, no? We have to be, in these challenging times, be of sound mind and body so that we can make the proper decision. And that, I think, is what we need to move into the new normal. So that's it for me, and these are my contact details. If you have any other questions or even suggestions, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Fabic, for your presentation. It's in times of great crisis where innovation or innovative leadership is tested. And this is how Mayor Fabic exemplifies this adage in their COVID response. Earlier, the mayor presented the best practices in COVID response in their municipality in the area of basic service delivery and economic and livelihood support that are worth emulating by other local governments nationwide. Dito po makikita natin ang contrast ng Romblon at Cebu and other local governments in terms of local impact. Indeed, many lessons to be learned from Odiongan. So maraming salamat, Mayor Fabic, for the insightful experience. Before I will give the floor to Dr. Joel Rocamora for his reaction, let me remind our audience, if you have any questions and comments, please type them into the question box and I will bring them up during the question and answer portion. So our second speaker is the Executive Director of the Institute for Popular Democracy. He was the former Secretary of the National Anti-Poverty Commission, a fellow Bisdak or Bisayang Dako. Please welcome in the platform Dr. Joel Rocamora.
Okay, magandang hapon. Trina for President Movement. Oh, hindi ata narinig ni Trina. Dapat si Al ng speaker tapos moderator lang ako kasi hindi naman ako local government official. Si Alvin ang konsihal sa Cebu saan isang comment na magandang contrast ang Odiongan na walang ni isang kaso sa Cebu, number 1 ngayon. Dami ng mga COVID cases. Where I can contribute is start by contrasting yung nagagawa sa local government sa national. Ano ang relasyon in pandemic policies ng national at saka local. Kung pag-uusapan natin ang national government policy towards this pandemic, mag-umpisa ako sa diba marami sila, may alphabet soup sila na MCQ, MECQ, gano'n. May bagong kategorya para naman ito sa gobyerno. EGI, Enhanced Government Incompetence. Lumalabas talaga dito sa pandemic na to ang incompetence ng gobyerno, ng national government in particular. So, na lang natin sa if I were to characterize the government's policy and implementation with regards to this pandemic, the best way to characterize it, and I'm not the first one to say it, is it's highly militarized. And the best example is a recent stupid announcement by the Secretary of the ILGs, General Anyo, na pupunta sila bahay-bahay at hanapin yung positive sa COVID, maski na asymptomatic or light symptom, tapos dadalhin nila sa quarantine centers if necessary by force. I mean, what could be more stupid than that? Lalo na nung dinagdagan ng Chief of Police daw, yung gagawin daw nila contact tracing, paghahanap nitong dapat dalhin sa quarantine centers ay parang naghahanap daw ng kriminal at yung mga accomplice ng kriminal. I mean, it's just so stupid. Pardon my French. And ang isang malaking problema dito is walang leadership na klaro. Si Digong, lalabas siya sa mga press briefings na starting at midnight and one time lasting until 2 o'clock in the morning. Tapos, wala namang saysay yung gagawin ni Digong. Half of the time, he looks either drunk or sleepy. The second major problem sa leadership is the Secretary of Health, Duque. I think all senior government officials, both legislative and executive, have already said Digong should fire Duque. For some reason, Digong refuses to fire him. So walang leadership. Mayroon ngang interagency task force pero hindi naman coherent yung policies. Ito specific sa LGUs. Walang consultation sa LGUs na totoo. So ang problema hindi lang naman policies specific to the pandemic. Lumalabas talaga yung pagka-bureaucratic ng gobyerno, ng national government agencies na hindi nila kinikilala yung pagbago ng sitwasyon. So, halimbawa, si Trina, nagbanggit niya na maraming private initiatives to help people who are suffering as a result of the lockdown. Sabi ng gobyerno, kailangan pag magsusulisit ka ng pera para makatulong, food and so on, kukuha ka muna ng permit from DILG or DSWD. I mean, what could be more dumb than that? Worse, yung barter daw, illegal daw, sabi ng DTI, pag-barter, hindi mo matatax. So, tingin ko yung mga binanggit ni Trina na kailangan gawin ng local government, if you will notice, are exact opposite of what the national government is doing. And thankfully, despite the failure of the government to provide leadership to local government units and or to consult them about what national policies affecting them should be, there are many examples of local government performance in this pandemic. Nasa internet naman lahat yan, starting with malapit sa amin na syudad, yung Marikina, Pasig, Iloilo, currently Cagayan de Oro also, and yung nilabas sa Rappler na 4 women mayors who were held up as examples of good. Biro lang. It is linked with charter change. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Recent moves, yung mga DDS, sipain si Senator Pangilinan, si Senator Pico, from his position as chair of the Constitutional Reform Committee of the Senate. I don't think that will get anywhere for the simple reason that, that senators have an institutional reason for opposing federalism. For now, they can claim to have a national constituency and therefore, lapit na sa pagtakbo ng presidente, any shift to a federal system will of necessity require that senators would represent federal state. In other words, bawasan mo yung constituency ng mga senador. So, tingin ko hindi lulusot yan. Hope na lang natin is bago tayong presidente, that this new president will call for a constitutional convention because it's the only way that charter change will happen and therefore for federalism to happen. Pero may malaking posibleng mangyari. May decision ang Korte Suprema based on a case filed by, I think, naging Governor si Mandanas sa Batangas, saying, so the Supreme Court says that the 40% going to the IRA, internal revenue allotments of local governments, should come not just from collections of the BIR, but all other revenue collected by the national government, starting with customs collections and other fees collected by national government agencies. That will put huge chunk of additional money sa local government, and it will not only create more the local governments can do more things. It will also mean that local politics would change, because a lot of local politics is really on who gets to be in line in Manila, holding out their hand for money from the national government. And there's really, since there's very little money collected in local taxes, then there's very little incentive for ambitious people to run for office. So there will also, with more money in local governments, there will also be more premium on local government officials like Trina who are good managers. Kung wala rin namang pera, hindi ka kailangan maging good manager. But when you have more money, you can do more things. You can, for the first time, have real local politics. Palagay ko, it's really people on the ground, people who are running local governments or are in local legislative councils, who should provide the ideas. How do we assure that local governments can do more things, not just during times of pandemic, but during regular times? And the thing is, hindi na tayo pwedeng bumalik sa old normal. Talagang kailangan baguhin lahat. Maybe I should stop there. Kwentuhan na lang tayo. Question and answer na lang tayo. Alvin, okay na ako. Hello, Alvin. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yep.
Okay. So we'll go now to the questions. We have questions for Mayor Trina. Did the Balik Provincial Program affect your area significantly? And there's another question. Initiatives are being done to support the income, livelihood of the many workers who lost their jobs because of the pandemic. These two questions are addressed to Mayor Trina.
Okay. So, in terms of yung Balik Probinsya program, that's different kasi from the Hatid Probinsya program. Sa program, ito yung mga stranded individuals na gustong makauwi pero yun na stranded sila dahil sa community quarantine. Yung Balik Probinsya naman, yung mga nagtatrabaho na at nakatira na sa ibang lugar and then they want to just come back to the province. Balik Probinsya, I think we're starting to feel the effects pa lang now, no? Kasi pauwi pa lang sila eh. So, yung Balik Probinsya program, yung totoong Balik Probinsya program, it's been rolled out in 10 provinces. Hindi pa naman kami kasama. Hindi pa namin masyadong na-feel yun, pero we do have returnees who are coming back kasi mas okay ang buhay dito sa probinsya. Pero yung sa Hatid Probinsya program, which is yung pagbalik ng mga locally stranded individuals, first we had 1,380 people coming back. No? In the second wave, we have 880 as of today, no, who have come back also. So these individuals ay kina-quarantine namin for 14 days sa facility and then another 14 days of self-monitoring. So malaki yung impact sa amin kasi unang-una yung sa resources namin. So syempre, yung mga naka-facility quarantine sa mga schools, nabantayan yan ng mga barangay officials, ng mga army reservists, all these people, yung mga police. So yung drain sa resources, no, ng barangay at saka ng munisipyo, imagine, no, 24 hours na bantay for the past 4 months. So, hindi siya biro, no, in terms of resources. So, that's something that has really affected us in terms of yung mga programa namin na instead na sa ibang programa, napupunta doon yung aming resources. However, it's a necessary thing that we have to carry out to ensure the safety of our town. And yun na nga, so far, we've not had COVID positive case in our municipality as a result. No? Yung vigilance talaga na yun comes at a price. We are anticipating na mas marami ang uuwi na, no? Dahil marami nang nagsara, wala nang mga trabaho, all these things. So we are talking about the kinds of programs that we want to build in for them. So katulad na nasabi ko sa recommendations kanina, so programs to support MSMEs as well as yung mga unemployed. So we were thinking of giving out interest-free loans, very, very interest, no, through cooperatives. So kasi pag gobyerno direkta ang magpapautang, malaking chance na hindi na ito babayaran. Kasi, you know, the concept, government, dole-outs, ganyan. So thinking is to channel that loan money through cooperatives. So people can loan from the cooperatives at no interest, very, very low. Nagbibigay din po kami ngayon ng mga pangkabuhayan kits or livelihood kits. So katulad nung isang araw, nagbigay po kami sa mga gumagawa ng mga kakanin at saka yung mga negosyo cart, yung parang mga ambulant vendors. So instead of money, binigyan po namin sila ng mga, with DTI, binigyan ng mga oven, ng mga sticky rice, yung mga kailangan nila pangluto, yung mga equipment, no? So that's another way that we're helping yung mga people in terms of yung mga economic program. So we anticipate that we have to do more of that as more people come in from Balik Provincia.
Thank you, Mayor Trina. Here's another question from an official of the Sangguniang Kabataan here in Cebu for Joel Rocamora. Perhaps the good mayor can also answer this question. The Duterte administration is propagating the narrative that the worsening COVID situation is all the fault of the Filipinos, the lack of discipline, gahig ulo. What is your reaction?
Ang mga pasaway nasa Malacanang, wala sa Cebu. Hindi, seriously. Yung mga sinabi ko kanina na problema sa national government policies and implementation, pasaway. And then there are also studies, scientific studies that have been conducted, seen at least 2 reports that show that compared to other countries, neighboring countries, Filipinos have been very good about following restrictions on during this pandemic. I think one report showed compared 24 countries and the Philippines was number 2 in being obedient. And nakikita rin naman natin yan. When I go out, when I go to the supermarket, go to the drugstore, 99% of the people wear masks.
Yes.
And the businesses that I visited also prepare adequately for following I think the problem is not that Filipinos are pasaway. The problem is that our leadership is pasaway. Kung sa Binisaya pa, ang presidente banggod nato din,
Yes.
ang bugirong bugoy.
Mayor Trina, would you like to give your reaction?
Yeah, I just want to say, kasi, di ba, sabi nga nila, bakit ang Pilipino, pag pumuntang abroad, sumusunod naman sa batas, no? Very good citizens naman sila sa ibang lugar. Which means na hindi necessarily inherent sa Pilipino na isasabihin natin hindi disiplinado, kundi as government, we have to provide the framework that we can allow our citizens to be more compliant and more disciplined. So siguro, kailangan ang gobyerno, kailangan mas consistent. Kumbaga, sabi nila, the law should apply to everyone para naman may incentive din ang tao na sumunod, no? So walang pinilian, kumbaga, and dapat talagang consistent nga. Also siguro, one reason na may movement ang mga tao kasi they're trying to find food to put on their table, no? They have to go to work. So if we want citizens to move less, maybe we have to be able to find ways to provide their needs more, no? So those kinds of things. So in short, it takes 2 to tango. Siguro meron din naman talaga mga pasaway na mga ilang mga mamamayan, but I feel this is a minority. I think more Filipinos are really just trying to struggle to live day by day, to meet their needs. So government should facilitate what they need para hindi na masyado silang gumalaw and nga na violating our protocols. So government can never blame their citizens. Government should come up with a way to allow citizens and to prompt citizens to follow them.
Here's another question. This is about education, Mayor Trina and Joel. What would be the most effective approach to basic education under the pandemic? What adjustments are being done in Odiongan and in Cebu City?
Ikaw muna, Trin.
Kami po, nag-meet na ang school board namin and we've already, kasi nag-conduct ng needs assessment and capability assessment. So nakita, napaka-konti lang ang merong mga smartphones, computers, so hindi feasible ang online learning as well as, medyo may problema internet connection. So for elementary, we're really doing a modular learning. So we're printing modules, producing modules, and gamitin tong modules para sa mga estudyante. So to meet the reproduction needs, nag-realign po kami ng funds. So we're purchasing 15 Riso machines to help our 40 schools with the reproduction of the modules and to, yung mga recycled paper and other things para medyo ma-lessen yung cost. Of course, as the environmental impact. We're putting up a makeshift TV studio for recording learning videos, and we're tapping a dedicated local channel just for classes. So isang channel na buong araw ay puro mga educational videos lang, na may schedule yung mga different levels. Sa mga nakatira sa mga medyo malalayong lugar, sa mga bundok, so we'll be providing USBs na pwede lang i-hook up sa TV nila, or pwede nga merong community TV, no? May communal TV, and then may schedule lang para mapanood yung mga videos na yon. Also looking into putting up barangay learning stations for with computers and internet connection for the students. Meron na kaming free public wifi ngayon sa certain areas, so nagagamit din to ng mga bata. Ang gusto ko lang masabi is na it should never be a one-size-fits-all solution. Kasi for example, for municipalities like mine, na wala pa kaming COVID case and highly regulated yung mga pumapasok, we should be allowed to have face-to-face classes. Kahit na 2-3 times a week, no? Kasi nothing beats face-to-face classes pa rin eh. So, it should be parang case-to-case basis, no? So, sa mga lugar na walang COVID cases, sana i-allow nila ang face-to-face classes. But habang inaantay natin yung pagpayag ng DepEd sa ganong klaseng polisiya, we're really putting resources into reso machines, reproduction capability para ma-cope up yung mga modules na kailangan ng mga iba-ibang mga levels.
In Cebu City, the local government is open to blended learning, and we are now closely working with the Department of Education. So those who have access to the internet will adopt the online learning, and those who have no access will adopt the modular approach. Recently, I filed a resolution in the City Council urging the Executive Department and the Cebu City Local School Board to study the possibility of installing fiber optic in different barangay of the city, and also explore the possibility to buy gadgets for our public school students and teachers. So it is now being studied by the local school board here in Cebu City. Joel?
Yeah, agree ako dyan sa itong gawin nila, Trina. Kung wala namang infection in a municipality, tapos ito, importante, adequate health measures for preventing infection, dapat payagan yung face-to-face school. I mean, we're having to adjust to so many things in this pandemic. I don't think we should burden our children to adjust to a different way of learning. It's hard enough being a 7 or 8-year-old going to school. I think the year would be lost, a year for learning. I don't think we really need to disallow face-to-face learning in situations like Odiongan and actually Siquijor also. Siquijor does not have a single case of COVID. I don't see why they can't allow schools to operate as usual.
The Philippines' total debt loan has now ballooned to 9 trillion. How do we account the national government in terms of providing assistance to local government units for their pandemic response, especially now that the LGUs are playing a greater responsibility in addressing this public health crisis? Mayor?
Sorry, could you repeat that last part? How do we
account the national government in terms of providing assistance to LGUs in light of the total debt loan that we are in now, which has now ballooned to 9 trillion pesos, Mayor?
Nabigyan po kami ng bayanihan grant to municipalities, which was equivalent to 1 month of our ERA. However, aside from that, yung sasak, no, yung ating social amelioration. But beyond that, wala po kaming natatanggap or nararamdaman na mga funds, no? So I'm hoping that more funding could be given to local governments, because really we are at the front lines, we are at the trenches, and napakahirap po para sa amin, no? And siguro even for poorer municipalities, they would have even more difficulty regarding that. Siguro yung mga big cities, medyo may mga pera, no? May resources, pero kaming mga nasa probinsya, nasa isla, need further assistance, no? Pero since wala pa yon at the moment, we are realigning our own local funds. Yun na nga, as I said earlier, yung mga parang programs na hindi naman ganun ka-importante sa ngayon, tinatanggalan muna namin sila ng pondo, at yun ang binubuhos muna namin at ginagamit. Also, I really want to say na ang laki ng papel ng mga private individuals, ng mga pribadong mga tao na tumutulong, mga kumpanya din, na they're really giving a lot of assistance. Yun. We need more from the national government.
Joel, saan kaya napunta itong 9 trillion pesos?
Ewan ko. Pero that's really, it's not yet a big public issue, but it should be made a big public issue, because there are studies that show that there's serious underspending the national government. So they realigned some 350 billion pesos from the 2020 budget for COVID. They're in the process again of of forcing agencies to save for COVID. And then the last report I saw says the government has already acquired more than $7 billion US dollars in loan specifically for COVID. That's roughly 350 billion. So there's a lot of money and it's not being spent. The DOH alone, okay, had a 2020 budget of some 100 billion. They got an additional 50 billion PPEs, other expenses related to COVID. Of that 150 billion, at the end of June, they had only spent 72 billion. So massive underspending. And then last, there's several bills in the House calling for stimulus to assist businesses who are having difficulty in this pandemic. As far as I know, only one of these three bills have yet been approved. I forget the acronym, but it's a bill that already passed that allocates 1.4 trillion pesos stimulus for the economy, for local governments, for businesses, and so on. And the government has said, no, there's no money for that. And they, in the extension of the Baho bill, yun, bayanihan sa, basta ang acronym ko Baho bill. Yung extension niya, the government says the government can only afford an additional 140 billion. So I don't. For me, it's not a question of where are they spending the money that they have. The more important question is, given the obvious needs, how come they're underspending? I mean, it's gross underspending. Yun ang dapat tanong natin sa gobyerno.
Thank you, Joel. May babasahin lang akong ilang comments dito sa chat box. This one from Judith Barrios. Maraming salamat, Mayor Trina, for your input. Sana we had a mayor na kasing galing niyo po. Here's another one from Gas Sardina, our good friend Gas. Mayor Trina, thanks very much for your inputs. Your kind of leadership is what many LGUs need. Kudos to you and your council. Here's a question for Mayor Trina. How are you maximizing the LDRRMF? COA recently showed that many local government units have unused funds. This question is from Kathleen Kesi Sumailo.
Okay. So actually, yung sinasabi na yung unused funds, ito yung mga sinasabi na trust fund, no? Kasi lahat ng mga hindi nagagamit na LDRRMF funds for the past 5 years, papasok siya sa isang trust fund that you can then use for preventive measures or yun na nga, yung mga tipong disaster mitigation, no? So kami po, na-exhaust na namin yung mga LDRRM funds namin sa trust fund. We've exhausted our 30% as well. So yung 70% for normal disaster activities, hindi ko pa siya ginagalaw. Why? Kasi start pa lang ng tag-ulan, no? So aside from the pandemic, then now we're dealing with dengue, then andyan na po yung mga bagyo na parating, no? Siyempre may mga occasional lindol. So we can't fully exhaust our LDRMF funds as well this early on in the year. We have to have a reserve kasi yun na nga, marami pang pwedeng mangyari, no? So, pero yung mga quick response funds, exhausted na po namin yun, nagamit na namin. And I think karamihan sa ating mga LGUs have already used up their funds. Yung sa COA siguro na yung iba may mga unused funds pa. That was siguro before COVID. I don't know if that was after COVID na, no? Pero I think most of us have used up our RRM funds. Pero may konti pa rin reserva dahil nga sa mga posibleng mangyari pa sa taon. So, but maganda po dun sa ating LDRMF funds along with yung lumabas na DBM resolution and COA resolution, they allowed us to use emergency measures, no? Which is one of the reasons why I was able to use our disaster fund to purchase mga agricultural products, yung ating mga fruits and vegetables, yung mga chickens, at yung mga fish from our farmers and fisher folks. Kasi normally, hindi mo basta-basta pwedeng gawin yun kasi wala namang mga official receipts itong mga magsasaka. Pero dahil sa binabang circular, we were able to utilize our DRM funds to do so.
Here's a follow-up question from our good friend Jude Esguera. May underspending din daw yung bayanihan funds na ibinigay ng DBM sa mga local government units. 15% spending by end May lang daw. Is this true?
Paano siya? 15% spending?
15%, 1.5.
So, Hindi ko po alam yon kasi ang nakalagay po doon sa Bayanihan Grant, all unexpended funds shall be returned to the National Public Health Institute. So yan po talaga use. Medyo ginagawa namin yung pondong yon kasi nga sayang naman kung hindi na siya
5 minutes.
Pero yung siguro na ginamit nila yung Bayanihan Grant nila para sa pagpatayo ng iba ganon, hindi pa nila fully expended yung pondo nila. So, baka meron pa sila. Pero I'm not sure po about yung na 15%. Hindi ko pa siya na-encounter.
My question dito, Joel, from one of the barangay captains in Cebu City. How serious would be the impact of this crisis to our economy, specifically on the millions who are unemployed now?
Malaki talaga yung impact. Part of the problem is I don't think the national government is really taking seriously the impact. I mean, employment lang, 18%, 17.7% of the labor force. I don't remember the exact numbers now on what that is. Pero we're talking about millions of people who have lost their jobs. And part of the problem with the economic impact of this pandemic is it affects that part of our economy where the poor people are. Yung informal sector, yung nagbibenta ng sigarilyo tingi, yung nagbibenta ng anong tawag nito? Yung pritong saging, anong tawag nun? So itong mga taong ito, the informal sector constitutes a very large part of our society. And itong mga taong ito, kung hindi ka pwedeng lumabas, hindi ka pwedeng magbenta ng sigarilyo tingi. So I have a paper fund that I can make available to anybody who's interested. Kailangan talaga na gumastos ang gobyerno to help people, to help the economy, because the thing is, at the rate that COVID infections they're still continuing to go up. Nagot talaga yung si Duque na yan na flatten na raw ang curve. Siguro na fatten sila dahil kinarakot yung pera. This pandemic is going to last for sure until the end of the year. And one problem that I'm trying to get people to pay attention to is everybody expects na the end of the pandemic will be once there is a vaccine. The problem is, once there is a vaccine, we still have to acquire it. Do we buy it? And the rich countries are already spending money. They're already making deals with the potential vaccine producers. So the only time I've heard anything from the government on acquiring vaccines is Digong saying, "No, don't worry, because the Chinese will give it to us free." As my Japanese friends would say, "Rat's a rock." I don't think we're going to get anything free from. Then the other thing I've heard is the spokesperson, si Harry Rocky. Sabi niya, hey, don't worry, ibenta lang natin yung government properties. As if, just turn around and get billions in order to get money by selling. And you want to sell government properties, it will take months, even years, before this deal can be consummated. And the government needs to set aside money now, and they need to go ahead and start making deals with potential vaccine producers. Otherwise, meron ng vaccine, nagva-vaccinate na sa Amerika at saka sa Europe, tayo wala pa.
Well, it looks like we've covered all the questions, Mayor Trina and Joel. So to our speakers, is there anything else you wanted to say before we wrap up this session?
Pwede magtanong kay Trina.
Sige, Joel.
May nakita ko sa chat, ano ang arrangements nyo sa neighboring towns? Kasi you set up waste blocking movement from other towns. The other thing is, what about the rest of Romblon? What's happening in the rest of Romblon? At anong ginagawa ng tatay mo?
So, yung sa checkpoints po namin, lahat ng bayan may sarili-sariling checkpoints. So, di ba, meron tayong mga quarantine pass, no? Lalo na nung ECQ, ng GCQ. So, we use those quarantine passes, workers passes. Meron po kaming regular meeting with the other mayors on the island. So, meron kaming parang island-wide, no, na group chat at meron din kaming mga face-to-face meetings and Zoom meetings. So we try to really coordinate our policies para pare-pareho po kami. Pati yung bilang ng araw, kung ilan araw dapat ang lamay. Every little detail, kailangan po medyo pareho kami kasi mahirap na kung magkakaiba. So really, may constant communication po kaming lahat na mayors para, as well as the provincial government para maliwanag po, no? So, ang ginawa namin sa Odiongan, dahil nga kami ang center, so napakaraming tao galing sa ibang bayan na pumapasok dito para mamalengke and to do other business transactions. Bawat bayan, naglagay po kami ng quota. So, nung ECQ, 100 persons per day per town. And then, nung nag-GCQ na, 200 persons per day per town. So, parang subdivision ba na iwan mo yung ID mo doon sa checkpoint, bibigyan ka ng yung parang pass. Pag exit mo ng town, ipapalit mo na naman yung pass para sa ID mo. So, in that way, we were able to regulate the movement of people coming into our town. Para naman, syempre, para sa safety din ng aking mga citizens. So, Romblon province, so far, we've had 7 COVID cases in other towns. Pero 2 pa lang ang local transmission, no? Kasi nga, maganda yung system ng quarantine. So, really, yun ang step. We have to accept the fact na posible talaga magkaroon ng COVID cases. Pero how to manage that and make sure na because of our protocols on quarantine and movement restriction, malilimit yung bilang ng tao na mahahawaan. So yun yung ginagawa namin for now. And siguro, Councilor Alvin, yung sabi mo na kung ano pa yung gusto namin ipaabot sa lahat, no? So, of course, I want to thank ACF for the opportunity to be with you today, and also, of course, to kay Councilor Alvin for moderating, and of course, kay Sec Joel for all your inputs. It's always very insightful to hear, no, from Sec Joel, and of course, from yung mga nagtanong po ng mga questions. Salamat po sa input din ninyo. I think the message that I want to leave behind is that despite all difficulties and hardships that we've encountered during this pandemic and during this time of community quarantine, yun na nga, even though we wish that there would be responsive program, no, from above, pero at the end of the day, we really have to make do with what we have, and we have to maximize our resources. So very important talaga na you get everybody on board. You must provide the right information to everybody, provide reassurance, really to get everybody to act together, no? Kasi kailangan calibrated yung response. Hindi pwedeng ikaw lang gumagalaw, kundi everybody has to help out. And I really want to leave out of hope. Siyempre, kailangan may pag-asa. Napakahirap kung walang pag-asa. So, kahit anumang mga paghihirap na dinadanas ng ating bansa, sana andyan yung pag-asa sa ating lahat na pwedeng mas maging maganda pa rin ang hinaharap. And we have to believe that, and we have to work for that. And it really is possible. So, sana there's always hope for everybody.
Thank you, Mayor Trina. Joel, your parting statement?
Trina, say hello to Lolong. Yun lang. Wala na akong parting statement.
Yeah, thank you, Joel, and thank you, Mayor Trina. It was indeed a pleasure being with you today. Again, we appreciate both your time. Indeed, moving forward, the new normal becomes the path that must be taken. The new normal must be a better normal in the field of local governance as we navigate new approaches and solutions on how to prepare our community to face any pandemic. With that, let me conclude our 7th session of the ACF webinar series. Thank you, our distinguished speakers, and all our participants. We will see you next time. Daghang salamat, Joel, Mayor.
Sige, daghang salamat.